Liza Lawrence here with episode 42, The Lord's Prayer. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 through 13. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. This week, we get to hear from two ladies. Susie shares how her mama taught her the importance of prayer by her example of reciting the Lord's Prayer each night, and of her mother's miraculous healing from cancer after being in the presence of her Lord. Cammie will then share a miracle story that involves her car and the burden that was lifted in her life at just the right time. Miracles happen in all kinds of ways, and I'm so excited to share these stories with you today. But first, we're going to do a shout out for the review of the week. This is from SK Cowboy Mom. Wonders and Miracles is so uplifting. Thank you for sharing these stories. Thanks for writing that review, and thank you to everyone who shared on the podcast. Your stories truly do uplift. I get so many emails and so much feedback from my audience that lets me know that they appreciate the stories that they're hearing. So thanks so much for sharing your stories, and thanks so much for writing a review so that people can find this podcast. So now let's jump into these stories today. All right, well, I'm here with Susie today from Utah, and she's going to share a story with us that happened with her mother back in 1953 with cancer. Susie, I appreciate you sharing your story with us today, and tell us what happened.
Well, as you said, the incident was in 1953. My mother was born in 1904, and in those days, she lived in a little rural community quite a ways from town. She would have had to have walked 7 miles both ways in order to go to school. And so her education stopped at elementary school. Although by today's standards, Mama may have been deemed uneducated, but her education didn't stop her from raising 9 children pretty much on her own. Her first husband died when her 8th child was 3 years old. And then she married my father, but he became bedridden when I was just a toddler.
Wow.
So Mama worked any job that she could find to provide for her big family. She was actually the first woman to work on the Utah state roads. She graded roads with a team of horses. She would pack up all of her children in the morning and put them on a wagon and take them with her. And she would go down and spread out a blanket under a big tree and sit them there with some bread and sugar sandwiches. And then she would grade the road down to the next tree, go back, get her kids, and move them down.
Wow.
And so she was just a pretty remarkable lady, and her children were her life. Mama was a lady of simple faith, of real faith. Every night when she went to bed, she said the Lord's Prayer. Having so many children in a small home, I was the one who got to sleep with Mama. So every night I would hear her pray. And it became very important to me because I figured if my mother was saying these prayers, then that's something that I should do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned those, and her faith that she had really helped me throughout my life, because whenever a hard time would come up, I would remember Mama and how she dealt with it. And it was usually always with prayer.
Mm.
So it meant so much to me. But in 1953, Mama developed uterine cancer. And the doctors in our town wanted her to undergo surgery. But as Mama said, she wouldn't go under the knife. The only other option that she had was to go to Salt Lake City and be packed with radium. And that was, I guess, the treatment that they had back in those days. I don't know if they had any other, but
Wow.
this was what they did for Mom.
And I need to look up that treatment. Is it a common practice? I've never even heard of that.
I don't really know, because, like I said, that's what was done with Mama.
Mm.
I don't know, had she gone to a different area, if she would have been treated differently, or if it was just so new back then
Right.
that they were just learning about how to deal with cancer.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
But I had a brother, Henry, and Henry was 20 years old, and he was married, living in Wyoming. And Mama had given his name to the hospital to call in case anything went wrong or if there was a problem. And as it turned out, there was a problem. The hospital contacted Henry and told him that he should come and get Mama and take her home and make her as comfortable as she could be, that the cancer had escaped the womb and that there was nothing more that they could do for her. And so Henry and his sweet wife, who was also close to only being 20 years old, headed down to get Mama from the hospital. And on their way, they were figuring out how they were going to provide for 6 sisters of Henry's.
Wow. And how old were you at this time?
At this time, I was 7.
Okay.
It's funny because one thing that I remember so distinctly, although I was only 7, was how very much I missed my Mama. I wanted to go see her so bad, but in those days, children weren't allowed to go in. So I just missed her so badly.
Wow.
But the night before Henry headed down to get Mama, she said at first she thought she was having a dream. She heard the very most beautiful music and a warm light surrounded her. And she said it was then that she knew she was in the presence of our Lord. She asked him to please just let her live long enough to care for her children. Well, the next morning, as the nurse was caring for Mama, Mama heard footsteps coming down the hall, and she told the nurse, "Here comes my son." Henry came into the room, and I don't know if they told Mama that she didn't have any chance of living or not.
Mm-hmm.
That was never something that I asked. But they took Mama home to make her comfortable and let her live as long as she could. They got her settled down in bed, and then Henry and his wife went to the pharmacy to get Mama's prescriptions for her. And when they got back, they went into her bedroom, and Mama wasn't there. She was up on top of her house fixing the chimney.
Oh, my goodness.
And here was this pounding going on, and they go outside, and the ladder's up to the rooftop, and my little mom, she was up there doing what Mama did.
Wow.
And so that happened in 1953, and Mama died 27 years later in 1980. She saw her children all raised, along with the births of her 38 grandchildren.
Wow.
And I know beyond a doubt that God knew my mother. Her faith made that possible. And I've also thought over and over how wonderful it was for my 20-year-old brother to be willing to take on his 6 sisters. And that love that he showed us was taught to him by our mom. And her story has just been so uplifting to me all these years because I do so believe in faith.
I love that. That really is beautiful and faith promoting. And she thought it was a dream, but do you think she really had kind of an out of body experience with the Lord and asking to stay and to be healed?
I do. Back in those days, there was no intercom in the hospital, so there was no music around.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said that she just heard such beautiful music and was surrounded by a beautiful light, I know, like she knew, that she was in the presence of God.
That's really beautiful. Did she have any other health issues, or was she fine after that?
She was fine until in the middle 1970s when she developed Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the disease that finally took her life. But she lived long and healthy, and she worked every day of her life. And we were just all so blessed that we had her and that our children had her.
Yeah, that's remarkable to have her live that long after, with her request to raise her children and then see all her grandchildren. That's beautiful.
Yes, we were so lucky. She was a character. She would come over to our home, and the first thing she would do in the summertime is she would grab the hose and get in a water fight with all my children. And my neighbor lady said to me, "How can you let your children show such disrespect for your mother?" And I said, "She started it."
I love that. Oh, wow. She sounds like an amazing woman, just a fighter and strong and faithful. I love that.
She really was. At one time, when my brother Chris decided he didn't want to go by the family rules, he ran away from home, and he was gone for several weeks. And during this time, Mama again prayed and told God that if he would watch out for her son, that she promised she would never drive by a hitchhiker again. Well, this was back before it got so dangerous that you would think you could do that. But so she would have herself and her 6 daughters in a car. And if we drove by a hitchhiker, we would just have to manage. We would scoot over, sit on laps, do whatever we had to do to pick up that hitchhiker. But this one day, as we were headed from Green River, Wyoming to Manila, Utah, it's about 60 miles, Mama also had her dog in the back window of the car. And she pulled over to stop for this gentleman. And oh my gosh, that dog snarled and barked and showed his teeth. And Mama told the guy, "I'm sorry." She says, "I would give you a ride, but my dog won't let you in the car." And so she left and went on into Manila and stopped there at, it was a grocery store, post office, filling station, kind of everything. And the gentleman that ran it was named Mr. Steinecker. And she told him how strange it was that her dog wouldn't let this guy in the car, that he had never acted that way before. Well, Mr. Steinecker asked her to describe this gentleman, and Mama did, and he called the sheriff. And this gentleman had just killed a man in Evanston, Wyoming.
Oh, wow.
And so I know, again, that Mama's interactions with our Father in heaven made it possible for us to travel in safety, because Mama was doing what she promised and God was watching over her.
Wow, I love that. I love these beautiful stories. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me tell it.
Thank you so much for submitting this story. I think it's just lovely, and it's fun to get to know you and to hear some of your upbringing and about your sweet mother and how her faith and strength and prayer taught you those lessons. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
I could go on forever, but I think Mama would say, just cut it off.
I love that. I love those stories. That's a neat story with the dog.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for letting me tell it. You keep these stories inside of you. And of course, I've written them in my life story. I've written my story down, but I'm so happy to be able to share them with someone else.
Yeah. And so many people will hear this and benefit and love it. So thank you very much for sharing it.
Thank you.
So I'm here with my cute cousin, Cammie, who was my favorite cousin growing up all these years. And she is going to share a fun miracle story that happened last September with her car. So Cammie, thanks so much for being willing to share this story. I do love it, and I'm excited to hear you share this. So tell us what happened with this story.
All right. Well, thanks, Liz. When you said my cute cousin, I thought, oh, that's the same. I feel the same as you. You're my cute cousin. We're both just cute cousins. Anyway,
we are.
So my story, to me, I guess it's a miracle, but maybe just more of a, oh, I'm just grateful that this happened because this is what I needed at the time. So I have a car that I bought about 3 or 4 years ago at this point, and it's just never been a good car. It's never been a reliable car, but I needed it. I needed a bigger car for my kids. And then it ended up being a blessing because I ended up having a baby that we weren't planning on. So we had 3 kids. So we needed room for 3 kids. And anyways, this car gave us nothing but problems from the get-go. My husband was always having to work on it, and we were always having to put money into it. And luckily my husband's handy. But the bad part is my husband has not had a steady job for about 8 years. So money's always super tight with us. So every time the car would break down, it would just be like, oh my gosh, just here goes more money we have to put into the car. And this check engine light kept coming on, and my husband kept doing all this stuff to try and fix it. Well, last April, it was due to the emissions and inspections done and due to be registered. We couldn't get the check engine light to go off. And my husband would fix it. The check engine light would go off for a minute. And when I say a minute, I literally mean like 5 minutes. And then we would take it into like checker, and they would do a diagnostic, and they would tell us what the codes are reading. And so he would go home and fix it again, putting more money into it, figuring it out. And we just could not figure out what was going on, why the check engine light wouldn't go off. So here comes, this was in April, my car was due to be registered, and then we're getting into May and June, and it was getting to the point where I was so nervous I was going to get pulled over that I wouldn't take the bike rack off of the back of my car because I didn't want a policeman to be able to see that my car had expired on my license plate. So every day it's like a stress on me driving, and I'm a speed demon, I should say. So I thought, I cannot get a ticket because if I get pulled over, not will I just get a ticket, but my car will be impounded, and I clean houses for a living. So I have to be able to not just get from point A to point B, but A, B, C, and D and back home. So I have to have a car to get around. So I just kept driving it with the check engine light on, but it was getting to the point that I said to my husband, we have got to get this figured out. So I take it over to get the emissions and inspections done. At first I said, is there any way that you can pass it? Because we know it's just this sensor thing. And they're like, no, our computers won't let us. It flags it, so it won't let us. You've got to get the check engine light off. And they said, but you know what? We'll give you a temporary tag, which was really, really nice of the people at this place, because they really should not have done that, because my car had been expired for so long. The license and registration had been like 4 months at this point. And really they only are supposed to give them to you, like, so if your car is due in April, they'll give it to you in May, and you have 2 weeks to fix it. So they really weren't supposed to give it to me, but the guy was really nice and was like, we'll give you these tags so then you can see if your husband can figure out what's going on. So I was like, okay, because I didn't have money to buy a new car, and I was saving but didn't have the money. So anyway, so my husband finally took the engine apart, got it figured out. He takes it in to do the emissions and inspections, and it wouldn't pass, which wasn't a surprise because you have to drive your car for so many miles for it to what they call reset the codes. So they told him to drive it to reset the codes. So we drove it one day thinking, oh, we've driven it enough. He takes it in. Nope, we didn't drive long enough. reset the code, so drive it some more. So we drove it down. We live in Layton, Utah, and we drove it down to like South Salt Lake, which there and back was probably like 60 miles round trip. Still didn't reset it. We kept taking it in every day. Finally, 2 weeks was up, and I went and cleaned a house, and I said to my husband, I'm going to take it in and see if we finally have driven it enough to get it to reset the codes. So I go and clean, and I run over there, and I pull in, and I'm all excited, and I'm like, okay, let's see if this works, because at this point, they truly knew my car. And so I sitting there, and it hardly took any time. Like, I remember getting on my phone, and all of a sudden he was like, okay, it passed. And I was like, it did it? Oh my gosh, thank you. And I was like so excited. And I was like, finally. And I get in my car, I pull out of the parking lot, I head to home, which is, I can ride my bike to the place. I mean, it's super close. It's probably a half a mile. And my check engine light came on. I cried. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. I called my friends. I called my mom. I called my husband. I was like, it's a miracle. My check engine light stayed off just long enough to get me to pass emissions. And it did. And my check engine light never went off after that. It stayed on, and we have no idea why. Anyway, but my miracle is that it got me through to the time that I needed it to, because I don't know what we would have done if that car wouldn't have passed emissions. So it's a little miracle, but for me, it was what I needed at the time.
Right. And have it pass inspection and get it registered just enough time, like in literally before that check engine light came back on. I love that.
I've kind of had, I guess, looking back, a couple little miracles happened since then. So I knew that we needed a new car. I kept saying, before April rolls around again, we have to get a new car, because this check engine light, we know it's just not going to go off again. So I've been saving money to get a new car. And in December, the water line broke. And so I went to drive it. I go out, and there's fluids all over my driveway. So my husband says, you can't drive it. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. And I said to my husband, we're not putting another dime into this car. Like, we're going to get a new car. I've been saving money. It's sooner than I wanted, but we got to get a new car. So I was looking into new used cars, figuring things out. In the meantime, borrowing my mom's car. Finally kind of narrowed down to some vans that I want. And I go to apply for the loan. And as I'm applying for the loan and talking to the loan officer, she says to me, so what's your form of employment? And I said, well, I'm self-employed. And she said, okay, well, since you're self-employed, you're going to have to have your taxes. And I said, oh, okay, well, you know, I've had some issues with our taxes. They haven't been filed, long story. And I said, so I guess it just sounds like I'm probably not going to be able to do it right now. That's okay. You know, and I hung up the phone and cried, and went and said to my husband, well, I guess we're not going to be able to get a car. You're just going to have to fix the car. He was like, okay. So I cried and called my mom and cried, and just thought, well, whatever, and just carried on. It had only been like an hour, and I get a phone call, and I don't recognize the number, which is odd that I answered the phone. And it was the loan officer, and she's like, hi, this is so-and-so from so-and-so. And she's like, I just was calling to let you know that because you have, this is what's going to make me cry, that because you have such good credit, you're okay. You don't need your taxes. You've been approved for the loan, and you've actually been approved for even higher amount than what you've asked for. And the tears flowed. I was crying. I just kept saying, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. Like, I don't have a car. I've been driving my mom's car for a month, and she needs it back. And she was so cute to me. She was like, I just love that you're so happy. I don't think I've ever had somebody be so grateful for a loan before. And I was like, oh, you just have no idea. So, I mean, truly, I'm not kidding. I cried, and I cried. I cried when I thought about it. I cried right now when I think about it, because it was such a blessing that I needed that car. I needed the loan. So that was another little miracle, because here I didn't think I was going to be able to get a car for who knows till my taxes got done or till something in my life changed. And then suddenly I was approved for a loan, and I was so proud of myself, because she's like, and you can get higher than you want. I'm like, it's okay. I don't need the higher amount. I just need a loan. Anyway, so that was another little miracle that's kind of happened. And I have a car that I love.
And that's a fun story too, that you went searching for this van that you wanted and ended up finding a better one with a better deal.
I did, yes. I took the day off from work. My husband and I decided we were pretty much just going to scour northern Utah looking for vans, and we had a price range. And price range we were in, really nobody was selling vans for sale by owner, the van that I wanted. Or if they were, the price was really just higher than I wanted to go. Or my husband, he's really good at fixing cars, and he was an auto body tech. So he's like looking for these things. And I was so worried that I was going to get myself into another lemon that I was really hesitant on every car we looked. So I took the day off and we went and we were looking at cars. We had started in Sunset, and then we were heading down to Utah County where there were a ton for sale. And we were going to go to this little dealer, and he's like, so where is it? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, let me get on and look it up. So I get on the website where they were all for sale on, and and when I pull it up, the very first ad, there was a new car. There was a stand on there that hadn't been on there. It had only been listed for 2 hours, and it was right in my price range that I wanted to spend. I'm like, oh my gosh, look, there's this car down in Lehigh, the stand. I'm like, let's go look at it. And my husband's like, no, let's just wait till the kids get home. And, and I'm like, no, there are never cars for sale by owner. I want to go. I don't want to pay the dealer fees and da-da-da. And so he's like, okay. So I contact the guy, and he says, well, nobody's home, but my wife will be home at 2. I'm like, okay, we'll be there. And I truly was like, we are getting down there, because I didn't want anybody to jump on it. So we head down there, get there right about the time, little after the wife got home. And I contacted the guy because we had gotten lost. And so I was physically talking to him, and I said, so are you firm on the price that you're asking? And he said, well, I'm not necessarily firm on it. He said, but I don't owe anything on the car. He said, so I'm okay to sit on it for a while. He said, I have had 4 other people come and look at it, and they offered me 12, but they couldn't get a loan. He's like, I will go as low as 12. So we test drove it, and I really liked it because it was exactly what I wanted. And the price that he was asking was even okay. But my husband said, well, let's just see if they'll take a lower price. And so I was like, are you sure? And he was like, might as well ask. If they won't, they won't. I went to the door after we test drove it and said to his wife, I really like your van. I already know I qualify for a loan. My bank is down the street. Will you take this price? And she said, let me call my husband and ask him. And he said, yes, which completely shocked me. They took what we offered, and I got my van.
I love it.
And I love my van. You would think that I was driving around in a Rolls Royce, and I'm not kidding. It's so funny. I'm like, I'm right in style here in my 7-year-old van.
I love it. I love it. But you know what I love is it shows the gratitude. You worked so hard for that, and you had miracle after miracle that led you to it. So yes, for you to enjoy it, I think it's a beautiful testament of gratitude. Like, I am so grateful for this blessing in my life. I think that's neat that you still celebrate your van. I love it.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm grateful for things, because things just in my life just haven't turned out like I thought they would. And at 41 years old, I'm just not where I thought I would be. But at the same time, I just thought, I'm glad that the small things can bring me gratitude in life. And I think for me, I worked so hard that I think that's why maybe I'm not saying people aren't grateful for what they have, but I just think, like I said, even the small things, like being able to get that loan, it was like, yes, finally my hard work of even keeping up on everything, even when money's tight and budgets are small, it paid off to stick with it and not just be like, well, I'm throwing the towel in because it's not going my way.
Right. Right. And that is something I've admired about you all these years, Cammie, is that you just have the best attitude and you make the best out of hard situations and life. I think that's an attribute worth celebrating. I think that's amazing.
Well,
truly admire that.
You're not around me all the time.
It's true.
Nice. There are times I give up.
I know, but you know what? You give up probably for a moment and then you get back up.
There you go. That's the way to word it. And like you said, that's sweet. Because like I said, when I told you, I was like, oh, I have a miracle story. And then as time's gone on, I'm like, oh, maybe it wasn't quite a miracle, just because it wasn't big. It wasn't necessarily life changing for me, but it helped my life out. It helped lift a burden and something that was on my mind all the time because I didn't have a reliable car. My miracle is it helped to lift one of those burdens from my life.
Right. Which I love. And I know that the Lord knows our hearts and knows our burdens. And it was that gift of, I can help ease that burden for you. That's just beautiful. I love it. Thanks, Cammie, for sharing that.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right, well, that's our episode for this week. Thank you so much, Susie and Cammie, for sharing those stories. I just love all kinds of miracle stories, and I love acknowledging and seeing God's hand in our lives. Another quick call out for any miracle stories that you can think of in your life. If you'd be willing to share those, head to my website and submit a story on wondersandmiracles.com or contact me through email, Facebook, Instagram at Wonders and Miracles. I love to hear these stories, and I'm so grateful for everyone who's sharing them. Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 through 13. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. I hope that you can think of a time in your life where you have felt the power of the Lord's Prayer and prayer in your life, and a time when you have felt the Lord lift burdens in your life and take care of you. And remember to notice and celebrate miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.